Earth Ancients is a sponsor of the 2025 Cosmic Summit. That's going to be June 20th and 23. I really enjoy that conference. And one of the speakers is our guest today. His name is Mark Young, and he is coming to us from Australia. He is a geoarchaeologist. I'm going to ask him in a minute exactly what that means because I haven't heard that definition. But he's also an expert in the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis, cosmic impact events, and lost civilizations. So he's right in the middle of the Earth Ancients format, and I'm looking forward to speaking with him. But I want to remind you, if you get a chance to get out to uh, North Carolina to see this Cosmic Summit, you should check it out. If you can't, go to the cosmicsummit.com and go to their streaming platform. It's very reasonable for the full program, and sign up because you'll hear people like Mark, you'll hear people like Randall Carlson, and a whole group of other experts talking about ancient civilizations and other events in the past. So don't miss it. Mark, welcome to Earth Ancients. Great to have you on the program.
Thanks, Cliff. It's great to be here.
Let's start off. What is the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis? I mean, we hear about this asteroid hit. We hear about the devastation, but what specifically is unique to you about the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis?
Well, where do I start? So, one unique thing is obviously the scale in relation to how recently it happened. Certainly, it's the largest impact within, if we're talking extinctions wise, since the dinosaurs. But also, the impact mechanism is quite unique. So, rather than one big asteroid that came in and destroyed everything, the more likely scenario for the Younger Dryas is a shower or a shotgun blast of multiple smaller objects all over the world. And so it may even have been periodically over a decade or so. As we pass through a meteor shower, these things come in twice a year. If we're talking about the Taurids, for example, twice a year, there would be bombardment episodes. So one year it could have been North America, the next year South America, or even 5 years apart, or whatever. So yeah, there's a lot of unique aspects of the Younger Dryas impact compared to other ones.
What's the general timeline, Mark? What would we say? It wasn't one day, it wasn't one week, it was over a period of years, wasn't it?
Yeah, so assuming that the platinum mystery signature is related to the impact, it could have occurred over as many as 14 years. That's how long the platinum took to settle out of the atmosphere. It could also have been one day, and there was just a lot of dust and debris flying around. So, um, yeah. And it started about 12,870 or something years ago. That's what we've nailed it down to with the radiocarbon dating. There's an uncertainty of a couple of dozen years or so. And the date, like this is one of the angles that the critics attack is the dating in different parts of the world is slightly off by maybe a decade here and there. But
Mhm.
that's within the uncertainty of radiocarbon dating anyway. You're not going to get much more precise than that. So I think the official time span that the Comet Research Group proposes is about 12,870 to 12,730 or something. So within that area.
Okay. I should mention that you are part of the Cosmic Comet Research Project, correct? And that is formed
Yeah.
by George Howard, and it has a group of people. You basically discovered George in the Cosmic Summit group through what? The papers that he was publishing?
So I actually so I saw the Joe Rogan podcast with Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson back in 2017, and that's what actually inspired me to enroll at university to study this stuff. So I actually reached out to George in late 2018 because I'd noticed that some of the papers on his website were out of date. He didn't have all the new ones on there, so that was the start of our professional relationship. And after I graduated with my bachelor's degrees in 2021, I think it was, that's when I joined the Comet Research Group officially.
Now, were you granted a geoarchaeology degree under a degree, or I mean, what is a geoarchaeologist? I know the geo is the geology, but how does geology and archaeology fit together? And what is it that you're studying? Because it's kind of unique title. I love it.
Yeah, so geoarchaeologists approach archaeology using geo methods. So geology, geomorphology, geochemistry, geophysics, all that kind of thing. So ground penetrating radar, um, e- electrical resistivity tomography, geochemistry like ICP-MS and stuff like that. So it's basically a hard science discipline within archaeology. As we know, archaeology isn't necessarily a science per se. There's a reason it's in the humanities, under the umbrella of the humanities. So
Right. Excellent. Here's one that I'd love to get clarification on. Some people say that the impact was in the Atlantic with sporadic impacts into the North American and parts of South American region, but up-to-date data has changed. Where would you say the spread of the asteroid field hit on Earth?
yep. So there we have about four sites spanning the west coast of America. And there's a whole bunch. There's one in Syria. There's a whole bunch throughout Europe. There's a couple in Greenland where we've found platinum anomalies up there, and we've also been studying ocean cores up there. And there's a few in Canada, but the main concentration's over North America.
Okay. It's speculated that the Carolina Bays were formed by this impact. Is that what your belief is, or what would you say to that?
So when I started out in this, I believed that it was pretty probable that they were related to the Younger Dryas. But I mean, they're certainly caused by an impact event. There's no question about that. But I have my doubts now as to whether it was tied to the Younger Dryas or not. There are other groups who tie it to the 780,000 year event that created the Australasian tektite field. Yeah, I think that one's more likely than the Younger Dryas. Uh, and originally, a lot of the Carolina Bay people were on board with the Younger Dryas timing for it, but basically, it's just Antonio Zamora now who's an advocate of that. So,
Okay. But Mark, is there a ground zero placement for perhaps the biggest portion of this impact, perhaps an impact crater of significant size,
for the Carolina Bays or for the Younger Dryas?
just for the Younger Dryas?
So, when the Hiawatha crater came out in 2018, that was very exciting for us. And while subsequent studies have dated the impact much earlier, I think there's still a possibility that it was related to the Younger Dryas. Like I said at the start, it probably wasn't one big impact. And if it was, it probably occurred into the ice sheet rather than into the ground. So I know Randall Carlson has identified Lake Nipigon as a potential site for the Young Dryas one. I certainly think there's something to be said about that. If you had an impact into the ice, you wouldn't expect a traditional crater on the ground because it would act like a cushion, basically. And Lake Nipigon is very interesting in terms of its morphology. So if I had to put money on it, I'd say Lake Nipigon's pretty good. But obviously, no study's actually been done there, so we have no idea. There's a couple of smaller craters around the place that have been tentatively identified as being Younger Dryas, but potentially related to the Younger Dryas. But as I said, if the airburst rain theory, it makes most sense for the proxies that we see. So when these things detonate in the atmosphere, they don't really leave traditional craters at all. The only traces they leave are the microscopic evidence that you find in the soil. So.
What do you believe was the effect over this period of time on the animal life on the planet? Randall Carlson likes to say approximately 80% of the megafauna, the big land animals, perished. And we don't really know how much of the human population was affected because there's no documents. There's very rudimentary signatures of a human race on the planet. But what is your feeling on those two subjects?
Yeah, so certainly the megafauna disappearance is closely tied with the Younger Dryas. There have been critics over the years who said, "Oh, well, they actually survived a few hundred years after the Younger Dryas onset in these particular areas." And sure, that's likely. It's not like the dinosaurs, it's not a one and done thing. Like if you have one impact in this region and then a couple of years later you've got another impact in this region, or it creates well, there's obviously wildfires associated with those impacts, and that will cause local extinctions in that area, but that's not going to wipe them off the face of the planet. Like, and it's possible that the Clovis people also played a part in their extinction. Like that's been the doctrine for decades now. And if there was only a few left over after the impact events, then it makes sense that the Clovis would hunt them because they're also clinging on to their existence. Regarding the human populations, there's quite a bit of evidence, well, over the last few decades actually, but the first genetic evidence came out in 2022 to show that there was a South American civilization up to 20,000 years old in South America that disappeared at the Younger Dryas. So, and there's a lot of archaeological sites throughout South America that have thought to have been dated to the Pleistocene and have been, I guess, heavily criticized and denied. No doubt because of in part at least, because of the Clovis First doctrine. But I've got a short list of them here if you'd like me to read them off to
Yeah,
you.
give us the names.
So there's one called Boqueirão de Pedra Furada in Brazil, and the occupation there is thought to date between 20 and 45,000 years ago.
And how
That was
sophisticated are
first
these?
reported.
Are these considered hunters and gatherers, or are these a little more
Yes. So
sophisticated?
the thing is with these sites is that the lithics there aren't anywhere near as sophisticated as the Clovis relics, which is part of the reason why they're denied by the critics. One recent study even claimed that the lithics there were made by capuchin monkeys.
God.
But I mean, the latest genetic evidence from the region says that they weren't. So then we have Toca de Tierra in Brazil, with evidence of occupation at least 27,000 years old. Toca de Sitio de Mayo site in Brazil, 35,000 years old. The Arroyo del Vizcaíno in Uruguay, with 30,000 years. Santa Elena in Brazil, 20,000 years.
Hmm.
And this next site was published in 2020, Chiquihuite Cave in Mexico, with occupation 26,000 years and as early as 33. And this made worldwide headlines because one, the teams that were doing it were quite well respected, and two, well, it's obviously quite groundbreaking in its age. And initially, the Monteverdi site in Chile was dated to about 18,500, but that was revised down after years of criticism. So, and obviously now in North America we have the White Sands footprints, which are 24,000 years old, and that's beyond any doubt now. They've gone back and tested that. So originally they had issues with the dating method, but they've gone back and used like three different methods now, and they've all come out at 24,000. So we
Wow.
know that people were there 24,000 years ago.
Are any of these people building temples? Are we looking at foundations, or are we discovering them with simple petroglyphs on cave walls and rudimentary tools?
So the sites I listed, there's no real structures associated with them. They're more likely just campsites. Most of the evidence is, let's see, not particularly strong. So we've got hearths or campfires. We've got rudimentary lithics. We've got animal remains mixed in and stuff like that. So, and this is why they're not very well accepted because where's the structures? Where's the unambiguous Clovis points, for example? And yeah, so the civilization there was probably quite rudimentary. But I mean, that doesn't mean anything, right? Because if they were advanced, like in a Graham Hancock Atlantis sense, then wouldn't it make sense that subsequent people have come in there and salvaged and scavenged all the like the metals there, for example?
Yeah.
I mean, most metal from the Roman period and the Greek period has been salvaged and reforged over time to make weapons for war and things like this. Like any sort of valuable material is always picked up by subsequent occupations.
I stopped you as you were completing that list. Did you finish?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I recently was speaking to Dr. Richard Hansen, who's excavating El Mirador. He's one of the foremost Mayanists in the world. And he recently mentioned that there were two phases to the Maya. There was a very early phase that stopped approximately 2,000 years ago, but they don't really know when the inception date is. And the curious thing about this, though, is that their pyramids in Guatemala are the largest in the Americas and the most sophisticated. So this very, very early people was building and engineering monstrosities in Central and South America. And I'm curious, is it possible that we've got our dates wrong and that these earlier Maya that were wiped out may have been part of this Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis?
Personally, I wouldn't really point to the Maya as dating back that far, but you really don't need the Maya because the Maya, their structures and their architecture is completely different to what Graham Hancock and others have said, have pointed to. I think it's called Hanan Pacha, or the Cyclopean architecture at Sacsayhuaman and other sites like that. There's clearly two stages of industry there. And if, I mean, for argument's sake, all those sites that I listed off, maybe those people were the builders of these sites. And maybe they were part of the global civilization that Graham Hancock advocates for. And I mean, because the Cyclopean architecture is found all over the world, Easter Island,
Yeah,
Europe, South America. And
yeah.
so if these sites and these people a coincident with those constructions. And let's face it, more than likely, pre-Younger Dryas, those Cyclopean architecture, because there's been no other catastrophe since the Younger Dryas that would be capable of wiping them out, especially on a worldwide level. So yeah.
So, what would you say to those who advocate for Atlantis being destroyed around this period of time? I mean, we're talking Hancock and perhaps John Anthony West and a number of authors and researchers who have come before.
Yeah, so the t Plato's timing for Atlantis coincides directly with the end of the Younger Dryas, and there was a serious rise in sea levels around that time. So, from a science perspective, there's certainly some suggestion of validity there. Obviously, the archaeologists will say, "Show me the potsherds," and stuff like that. But when we're talking about a cataclysm and we're talking about a sea level rise, like 90% of the global population lives within a few kilometers of the coastline, right? Or along rivers. And so a sea level rise of 150 feet, 150 meters or 400 feet, that's going to erase almost all evidence of any civilization that was living there. So, and people say, oh, well, we've done archaeology on the coastal shelves. And it's like, you can't dive to 400 feet very
Yeah,
easily. Like, it's very difficult to dive that far. And yeah, I don't find it convincing. I think there's certainly room for an Atlantis, and people like Flint Dibble who claim there's no evidence at all for Atlantis. They're just lying because there's a lot.
yeah. I like that.
It's just not the kind of evidence that archaeologists tend to deal in.
Why is there so much
Circumstantial evidence, tangential evidence.
Yeah, why is there so much resistance to Younger Dryas? It seems like there's a certain body of scientists that are actually uh, evaluating the possibilities and finding solid evidence for an impact event, and then there's a whole bunch that are trying to write it off. Why? Why do you think that's the way it is?
There could be any number of reasons, really. One thing would be that they don't want it to be true because that would mean they've been wrong their whole lives. One thing that I kind of veer towards is that they've actually found Atlantis and they don't want us to know. They want to hold the secrets for themselves, and there could be any number of reasons for that. I mean, Zahi Hawass and Edgar Casey. Zahi Hawass's PhD was funded by the Casey Foundation, and if they did find the Hall of Records, they wouldn't share it with everyone. Because what if the Hall of Records told us about an impending Younger Dryas 2.0 in our near future?
Yeah.
They wouldn't reveal that because that would cause global panic. And yeah, I mean there could be any number of reasons. Yeah.
I find it interesting that you say that. When I discovered the Torid Meteor stream, I was perplexed that we hadn't known that much about it before. But apparently, our cosmos, Earth specifically, goes through it every 2 years. And
Twice a year, every year.
is it twice a year? Oh my God. Okay, I
Yeah,
had that
in
wrong.
late June and early late October, early November.
And I
It's
mean,
coincident with Halloween.
is there speculation among cosmologists that Earth has been impacted in previous times during these pass-throughs, or is it unique to just this Younger Dryas event?
So if the Torid theory is correct, then it stands to reason that it has happened in the past, and who knows the severity of those kind of things. There are specks of evidence here and there. The Comet Research Group has published a paper on a few impacts that happened between 30 and 50,000 years ago. So have you heard about John Reeves and the Boneyard in Alaska? The Comet Research Group studied a boneyard deposit in Siberia, and they were finding impact spherules within the skulls of these animals. And I don't know if you know the story of how George Howard became the cosmic tusk,
No, talk about
but
it.
they were finding tusks, mammoth tusks, that had meteoric material embedded in them. So if you imagine this airburst explosion, it's like a shotgun blast of meteoric material that affected these mammoths directly.
Wow.
And so the CRG in that paper, 2017, I think it was Hagstrom et al. It's in the bibliography. They theorized that these animals were all emplaced catastrophically by impact events. And it makes sense, right? Because some of these animals are flash frozen. Like you've got entire mammoths, fresh flash frozen, still with that daisies in their mouth and in the stomach. Like these things, and the bottom their legs are broken, and some of them had erections, which means they were asphyxiated, but they were buried alive. And so there's unquestionably been catastrophic events, and by the very nature of our meteor stream and how it functions, early on it's made into large objects, right? And over time, those large objects disintegrate into smaller and smaller hierarchically. And so the idea is that it entered the solar system about 20, 30 years ago. So by 12 years ago, it's about halfway through its disintegration compared to today.
Why do you think that we're not getting more information about this Taurid meteor stream? It seems like if the powers that be knew that at a period of time we've had terminating events or near terminating events, they would want to set up some kind of a system, perhaps aiming rockets to deflect meteors and other large obstacles that would impact the planet.
Yeah, well, recently we had the NASA DART mission, right, where they intercepted an asteroid and nudged it off course. And so maybe the reason they're doing that is because they know something's coming, or maybe they're just doing it because they can.
Funny. Hey, I'm curious. I just discovered about a year ago the black mat, this ash layer that's located at different parts of the planet. Talk about that and why it's so important in understanding this impact event.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the black mat isn't really an ash layer. There are some sites with a high concentration of ash, but it's mainly decomposed vegetation material. Um, so if you picture this impact event comes in, it decimates the landscape. The black matter is representing the aftermath of that, where it's cold and damp and swampy everywhere, and the impact proxies are found in direct contact with the bottom of the black mat, not within it really. And so we've got this ejector followed by the black mat, and the black mat contains the last remnants of the megafauna. Megafauna has never been found above the black mat, only within it or below it. So,
And where do we find the most evidence of black mat? Is it through North America, Europe? Where are they? Where is it most prominent?
North America is the main continent where it's found. There's more than 60 sites across North America where it manifests. In Europe, there's a similar black mat. It's called the Ocello Horizon. Critics have dated it to like 14,000 years ago. Um, but there's some good evidence that it actually correlates with the Younger Dryas boundary. So obviously, at one side it contains nanodiamonds, right? So, and nanodiamonds have only been found in the Younger Dryas boundary layer, no other layers above or below. And so there's reason to believe that whatever the site formation conditions are over there, for whatever reason, it gives off a different date. And I mean, in some cases, it is directly dated to the Younger Dryas, but in other places, it's a little bit off. So.
And you mentioned nanodiamonds. That comes up a lot when it comes to these uh, comet hits. Describe a nano. Basically, it's an exploded hunk of very hard rock, right?
So it's a piece of carbon materials that have been found in. Okay, so earlier on, critics claimed that the carbon spherules that nanodiamonds were being found in were just bug poop, right? And so obviously bugs don't poop nanodiamonds, but if even if they did, that just means that even if it was bug poop, I mean, that just means that the bug poop was on the surface when the impact affected it and created diamonds within it. So.
Hmm.
So the nanodiamonds are mainly found in carbon spherules. They're also found in the glass-like carbon proxies that we find. Um, and they occur during high temperature, high pressure events, mainly. There's also another method called chemical vapor deposition. So if we imagine that the impact event vaporized this carbon material, as it cools, it condenses and settles on an object, and they can be produced that way. So there's a couple of different methods to produce them. Some critics have claimed they form in wildfires, but there's no wildfire ever recorded that produces temperatures high enough to make that. And there's no nanodiamonds found in any other layers. Like there's been tests all the way from before the Younger Dryas through to modern times, and there's no nanodiamonds anywhere else. It's only the Younger Dryas boundary
Weird.
until you get to about 200 years ago, because obviously modern processes can manufacture these things.
Hmm.
Uh, you can make them in a lab, for example, and they're often used for polishing and stuff, like because obviously they're diamonds, they're very hard. So if you make diamond paste, there's going to be nanodiamonds in there. And so in modern sections, they are there, but once you get older than a few hundred years, there's nothing until the Younger Dryas.
Okay. Are they found in ice core at all?
So this is difficult. So in 2009, there was a PBS Nova documentary about finding nanodiamonds in the Greenland ice. And so they sent out this team. They recovered ice from the Younger Dryas layer, and they looked in there for nanodiamonds, and they found them in high concentrations. However, that data critics have recently been attacking these things, and even back in the day, shortly after the documentary came out, critics were writing to PBS saying this is fraud. You need to take it off the air. And
Hmm.
actually, the executives caved, and they took the documentary off the air. It's called Mega Beast Sudden Death. You can still view it on YouTube, but you can't view it on PBS anymore. And so, assuming that it wasn't fraud, which it certainly wasn't. There have been nanodiamonds found in the ice sheet, but it's not something that I would use as unequivocal evidence because I mean it's TV, right? And so who
Yeah.
knows what happened behind the scenes? I certainly would never accuse anyone in the Comet Research Group of fabricating this stuff, but there are questions about it. That's all I'll say on that.
What was the name again, Mark? You can find it on YouTube.
Mega Beasts, sudden death.
Mega Beasts, Sudden Death.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. That gets into my next question, which is the melting of the ice caps and the glacier snow during this impact. The big thought is that there was a massive flood, but you say otherwise. You say there was not a massive flood. You say there were perhaps a regional flooding. Talk about that a little bit.
So when people like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson have talked about this on podcasts, they often make the claim that, not directly, but they imply that the 400 feet rise in sea level happened overnight, and that's not the case at all. It happened over a few thousand years after the end of the Ice Age. However, at the Younger Dryas onset, there is a global sea level rise of about 5 meters, and that is very significant volumes of water entering the oceans in a very short time. And there's obviously Lake Agassiz. For decades, there's been arguments over when Lake Agassiz drained and the route that it drained. So they've identified three different routes that it could have drained from. But and the most recent study said it drained at the start of the Younger Dryas. But all of them disagree as to which route it was at which time, right? But I think the more likely explanation for that is that there was an impact into the ice sheet, and that released a crap ton of meltwater that flowed off of the ice sheet into Lake Agassiz, and it drained through all three of those routes at the same time. And obviously, there's a significant Heinrich event at the time of the Young Dryas, which means that there was lots of icebergs and chunks of the ice sheet that flowed off of the ice sheet and dropped debris out in the ocean. And so, I mean, the most likely scenario, I mean, obviously, if an impact occurred into the ice sheet, it's going to throw off a lot of meltwater, and it'll break up large portions of it, right? And yeah, there's not a whole lot of incontrovertible evidence for this, but yeah, I think that's quite likely.
So there's no areas that you or any other scientists have discovered where there were some of these meteors were impacting the ocean and causing tsunami-like events covering landforms miles inland.
It's difficult because obviously, if it impacts in the ocean, the crater's on the bottom of the ocean, so it's very difficult to find. There have been various claims of mega tsunamis, but there's not much evidence to support it, at least on the land. But we have to remember the seas were 150 meters or 400 feet lower then. So if there was a mega tsunami, the dunes or the chevrons that it produced are underwater now.
Right.
Even harder than finding a crater on the bottom of the ocean is dating that crater, right?
Yeah.
You can find all the craters you want, but you're going to date them. You need to drill them specifically and look for evidence within them.
Yeah, that's amazing. Talk about the changes in vegetation before and after the Younger Dryas. It kind of indicates this worldwide event.
Yeah, so if you look at the Greenland temperature data, it shows lots of spikes up and down, but overall there's a big trend of ice age and then slowly rising into the Holocene. But the Younger Dryas interrupts this gradual curve, right? So rather than a nice smooth curve like that, it goes like this, up and down. And that is one of the indications that something catastrophic happened there, right? Because obviously you've got all these oscillations further down the line during the Ice Age, but they're nowhere near comparable to what happened at the Younger Dryas. And so obviously before the Younger Dryas, you've got 50 different genera of megafauna roaming the Earth that aren't there afterwards. You've got and and interestingly, right, so if you look at the temperature data for previous interglacials, like what we're in now, they don't look anything like the Holocene. The Holocene is very stable. It's only tiny little oscillations in temperature all throughout. And that's not what happened in the previous ones. Like the previous ones are still interrupted by major spikes and oscillations. So, I mean, there's a number of unique components that I talked about in that 2023 lecture at the Cosmic Summit, like the methane concentrations, and stuff like that. So not only that, vegetation patterns were very different before the Young Dryas and afterwards. I showed in that presentation the dynamics between grasslands and woodlands and pine forests and stuff like that. They
Right.
changed dramatically, very quickly. And that's not something you see in previous events either.
Are geologists commenting on this change when they look back historically to various activities that are coming from outer space and impacting the Earth? Do they even comment on that, or do they not comment on it?
So actually, geologists are often the most accepting of the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis. They look at geochemical proxies and they say, well, that's obviously an impact. It's mainly most of the pushback comes from archaeologists. Did that come through clearly? I was having internet connection.
You went off for a minute. Can you repeat what you just said?
So geologists are actually the most accepting of the Younger Dryas stuff. It's
Right.
mainly archaeologists that have a problem with it. Um, And like a geologist can look at these impact proxies and say, yeah, like they can't have been caused by anything else, unless you're saying that those that I mean, so this is a catch-22, right? So these proxies been produced by a high technology civilization, but the assumption of archaeologists is that there was no such civilization then. So assuming there was no such civilization then, they can only have been caused by an impact event.
Hmm. Funny.
Um, I mean, we've got melting temperatures that are not up for debate. Like melted quartz needs 2,100 degrees to melt it, and volcanoes can't do that. The only thing that can do that is modern technology and an impact event, which is part of why some of the critics call us all frauds. Like they claim that everything that we show is fraud and that we sprinkled it in the sample ourselves. And it's like, no, that's not possible. Maybe in the first couple of years, when only a handful of scientists had looked at this stuff, but there's dozens of papers with samples that have never passed through the hands of any Comet Research Group member. And so, what they're suggesting in that case is that there's a global conspiracy between well-respected scientists to manufacture this evidence, and that's not happening. It's simply not. Yeah.
So this worldwide conspiracy is this the excuse for not acknowledging your work?
More or less. A lot of the critics like Marco and stuff like that, they just say, "Oh, that's all fraudulent. Don't worry about that." But it's just not simple
I,
as that.
I want to ask you about in our time that we have remaining, when we look at places like Gobekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, perhaps some of these underground cities like Derinkuru in Turkey, it looks like they're reboot centers where someone's trying to show people how to farm or animal husbandry or begin looking at the cosmological cycles. What would you say about that? Would you believe, would you have a feeling that they are recovery outlets for people that have survived these impact events?
See, this always makes me laugh because the archaeologists say, "Oh, there's no evidence of a lost civilization anywhere," and but they've discovered all these sites dating to exactly when they're supposed to be dated, right? So, 20 years ago, they didn't know, and they would have said these things don't exist, but now they do. And there's good evidence that Gobekli Tepe is much older than they've dated it to, right?
Yeah.
Not only because some of the pillars are inserted into walls, like there's walls built up around them that cover up the carvings, and so that T pillar was taken from somewhere else and reused in the construction of Göbekli Tepe. And regarding the specific question about uh, sort of re-civilization, uh, potentially. I don't know if there's good evidence to suggest that, but there's certainly not good evidence to deny it.
Hmm.
And I mean, like I just said, those pillars have been reused from somewhere. Maybe the original site that they were reused from was older, and they've come in after the Cataclysm. They've rebuilt these sites and they've restarted. Who knows?
Yeah.
Archaeologists don't know. They can't say that it wasn't that.
Yeah, it's still a huge mystery as to the function, but it looks like, given not only the date, but just what they have found so far, that they were educational centers of some kind. Are there
Yeah.
other hints and evidence of similar sites that you have discovered in any other parts of the world?
Not that I'm particularly aware of, or not that come to mind at least. I'm sure there are some. I mean, we talked about earlier about the Cyclopean architecture. Um, so obviously sites with the Cyclopean architecture below and more modern architecture above, they will have been repurposed or reoccupied over time.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I can't really think of any other than that.
We opened the show with you talking about a number of civilizations that have been found up and down the Americas. Do you believe or have any sense of a sophisticated hierarchy, civilization like an Atlantis, like a Lemuria, existing in other parts of the planet? And where would they be?
I mean, obviously in Europe, I mean the Middle East, we've got the Tepes, right? There's a few of them now. Uh, Obviously on Easter Island, you've got Cyclopean architecture there.
Right.
I haven't really looked into Malta too much, but you've got similar architecture on Malta. There's at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, there's actually standing stones there with holes drilled in them. So, uh, I mean, unless they fell off a boat and landed upright in the ground, they were certainly there before the Med Sea flooded, right?
Yeah.
So, and there's been stone circles found in at the bottom of Lake Michigan as well, I believe. I mean, there's all sorts of potential locations, but
Right.
obviously it's all very thin evidence. Like, there's no archaeological evidence other than the structures itself. And I mean, we've got Gunung Padang in Indonesia as well, which I am convinced, despite the pushback from archaeologists, I'm convinced that there was humans living there 25,000 years ago, and the site was built as a megalithic site. You can argue over whether it's a pyramid or not, but it's certainly pyramidal. And the lowest level that's been dated about 26,000 years ago is where the artifacts have been found, the Kujang stone among chief among them. So
And that's the big problem with
yeah.
Penang is the fact that it's been carbon dated. It's such an ancient period, a very old time. Why do archaeologists have such a problem with that? Well, I mean, because they just are all over Danny Hillman about that, the geologist who found and excavated that site.
Just because it's a bold claim, really, and the dating isn't direct dating of archaeological material. They've drilled core samples and they've brought data material from the core samples and they've dated that material. And archaeologists argue, well, that's not enough to say that this was occupied back then. But there's a lot of archaeology that's been done on the exact same type of dating, and the fact that dating was done on core samples rather than archaeological material is almost the entire basis for its retraction. And so if they want to retract articles for that, then they're going to have to retract hundreds more. It's just dumb. And if you look at the Kujang stone that's taken from the interface between the two lowest layers, it's very clearly an artifact. That is not natural. You can't, if any archaeologist looks at that and tells you it's natural, never believe anything they say because they're not interested in the truth.
Wow. Hey, Mark, it's been fun talking with you. You're going to be physically at the Cosmic Summit in June. Are you be flying to North Carolina?
Yep, I'll
And what
be
is
there.
the title of your talk?
That's to be determined. I still
Uh-oh.
haven't fully settled on what I'm going to be presenting, but it'll be interesting. It'll be Younger Dryas related. It might be a hybrid of the latest research in combination with a bunch of stuff about the critics. Um, because since the Hancock-Dibble debate, the critics have really stepped it up a notch, and obviously I might present some of that scientific fraud that I discovered, published to discredit the Younger Dryas. I'll talk about
Talk,
that.
talk a little bit about what you have determined and called scientific fraud. What does that mean specifically? Give us some examples.
Right, so a bunch of critics published a paper from Hall's Cave, and they state in the paper that the geochemical evidence from the Younger Dryas boundary was caused by volcanism. But what they did is they collected all of this data. They used very shoddy methods, but that's neither here nor there. And what they did is when they found that one of the samples came back with a major platinum anomaly, like the rest of the Young Dryas sites, they said, "Oh, we better not include that in our paper. We better delete that sample because we want to say the Young Dryas occurs above that." So their Young Dryas occurs at 151 centimeters in the strata, but the sample directly below that at 153 centimeters has the platinum spike at the Young Dryas. So in order to claim that their samples up here are the Younger Dryas, they had to delete this sample because they couldn't claim that if they hadn't deleted this. And so a co-author who was originally on the paper but pulled his name off after they submitted it, he sent me the original data that they had in the paper, and that's how we know they deleted it. Because the paper that's published doesn't have that sample in it anywhere. There's no mention of it. But that sample single-handedly disproves their entire conclusions. they can't claim anything they claim unless they delete that sample.
Oh my God. So
Yeah.
who are you going to be the one that outs them?
Yeah, I've been on a couple of podcasts talking about it in depth. I'm gonna present it in depth at the Cosmic Summit. Um,
Uh-oh. Okay. So
yeah,
those of you listening, either get yourself out to North Carolina or listen to Mark on the streaming program. By the way, it's $75 for the entire program, Saturday, Sunday, and I think there's some other programs on Monday, the 20th through the 22nd and 23rd. I think Randall Carlson's doing a special presentation on Monday and a couple of other people. So the streaming price, $75 for the whole weekend, is very, very reasonable. And by the way, if you do not make those specific presentations, they're cataloged and stored for you to look at your leisure, which is a very, very fun and great benefit because we all live in different parts of the world and we can't be up at the actual time of the presentation. So consider that. CosmicSummit.com. Go to the button on top and look for streaming and check it out. And make sure to see Mark Young, his presentation. What day are you speaking, Mark? Saturday, Sunday, or Monday?
it's on the Saturday, I believe, in the morning before lunch. So
Okay, excellent. So wonderful. Mark Young, uh, geoarchaeologist, thanks for joining me. A real pleasure. And I expect at some point when you recover from all your discoveries that you produce a book, fella.
yeah, so I've written basically a thesis length article on Graham Hancock's website. It's about 50, 60,000 words, going over all the different aspects of the Younger Dryas. So I might adapt that and publish it. There's any number of things I could write about. So yeah,
Yeah, writing takes
definitely on the
time.
cards at some point.
Yeah, it takes time and energy. So, hey, I really appreciate you joining us, and I hope your show is filled with people. And let's have you back again.
Sounds good, Cliff. Looking forward to it.